Medical story is a bit, well, it's more than a story, it's a medical nightmare now, and if you read the papers you'll probably come across this story. It's a shocking story of Brenda Ghorst, who is a grandmother. Brenda is now facing, well, she's facing a lifetime of pain, unbearable pain, after a botched hip operation. And what did that do?
This left one of her legs shorter than the other, and actually her foot pointing in the wrong direction. And she's here now, as you can see, along with Alicia Alina, who's a lawyer and specialises in medical negligence. Thank you so much for coming in. I know it's a struggle. We were just saying the things on your hands there, or because you find it really hard work on your crutches. You have to protect your arm.
But Brenda, lots of people get operations that go wrong, but to come out of an operation and your leg pointing in completely the wrong direction, surely someone somewhere who was carrying that out scratched their head and said, this hasn't gone according to plan.
I don't know if the surgeon who did it scratched his head at all, but, you know, I think it took a while for him to realise that things weren't quite right, you know. And
so immediately it wasn't back to front, it grew
not
back to front.
Yeah. I think perhaps after the first revision, you know, then it started to turn.
So the revision, your first hip operation, you said you've been very fit and well, not any problems, started to get a bit of pain in your hip, and you weren't too concerned when they said you have to have a hip operation, because you thought it was quite straightforward these days. So you had that operation. Tell us about the recovery, because that's when your worry set in, that you weren't recovering as quickly as people said you should.
Right. Well, you know, I was in the hospital and there were several other women having the same thing done, and they were all getting along beautifully and they weren't complaining of pain, and I was wondering, why am I different, you know? I'm walking practically with a walker, you know, and they're just toddling right along.
And you're in a lot of pain.
A lot of pain,
They sent you home, you went back to your 6-week checkup and said, I'm still in a lot of pain. They went, oh, just give it time, really.
Come back in 6 months, it's fine, there's nothing wrong there.
So who decided then that you needed this first revision operation?
Well, I pushed, you know, I kept going back and saying, I'm still in so much pain, there must be something wrong, and it was... The surgeon eventually said, well, all right then, I'll do a revision, even though there's nothing wrong.
So they go in to have a look, really?
And he did the revision.
And what did they do in that revision?
Well, they just put things back in place properly, you know. They take it out and put it back in again and make sure it's all right,
properly, it's where it should be.
Right, and there's, you know, cement issues and things in there, and they sort of correct that.
And when you come out of that, did you feel in any way, oh, that solved the problem, or feel a bit better?
No, not at all.
Well, even physically that must be awful, but mentally you must now be getting really down about things.
Getting very frightened, you know, of what's ahead for the future. How much worse is it going to get? Will they be able to make it better, you know? And I can recall in the hospital them trying to correct my foot with sandbags, you know, which was never going to help, because the leg was, you know, it was because of the hip, so... that wasn't going to correct.
And then you had infection set in?
Infection set in, right. After the second revision. Very, very severe infection. Very severe.
And then you had a third revision operation?
Third revision, yes.
And what did they do in that operation?
Well, apparently more of the same, you know, take it out, put it back in again, put more cement in this time, put another screw in there, you know.
And by this time your foot is starting
completely...
Well, we're beginning to see here what you're actually talking about here. We can see that your right leg is turning out there.
When I stand up, it's out a lot more. I can't, you know, it only goes that way.
Now, I'm
sure my knee is that way too.
Legal recourse is not what you're worried about, or not what you wanted in the first place.
No.
You just want your legs sorted out.
Absolutely.
So, Alicia, where does she go legally? When does she begin to get that sort of...
Well, it's a really interesting story that Brenda told me about how she decided to get legal advice, because the first thing to say, we benefit from a very high level of medical professionalism in this country, but sometimes things go really badly wrong, and this was one of those cases. So the issue for the courts to decide in these cases is whether she needed that first hip replacement, and it could be argued that she probably didn't if they did more diagnostics. And the second issue is how properly the revision surgery was carried out. And we know from the results that it wasn't carried out well.
No, and the trust was found to have been clinically negligent, and you were awarded £250,000 compensation. A lot of money, but I'm sure you'd probably rather have not been through all that.
No, I'd much rather have my leg, and I'd much rather look, you know, much better than I do. Going through 7 operations ages you enormously.
And I know your daughters live in Australia, so you haven't got family
America.
around you. In America, sorry. You haven't got family